everybody, and welcome to the INCOSE Circuit. I'm Barclay Brown, the CIO of INCOSE, and your host for this episode of Circuit. And I'm pleased today to have with me somebody who you will know very well soon. Steve Records is just about to join INCOSE as the new executive director. So I thought we'd get to know him a little bit and so good morning, Steve.
Good morning. How are you?
All right. I'm doing good. Good. So let me start here. We'll kind of jump right in the middle at the heart of something here. So you started out as an engineer, studied chemical engineering. That's your undergrad degree, right? But then you soon after that kind of lost your way and stopped doing engineering. So what's that about? What happened in your career process?
I claim to be a recovering engineer, right?
Okay.
No, so I do have a chemical engineering degree. About halfway through, maybe 3/4 of the way through my degree, I realized I really didn't want to do full scale chemical engineering. So I took all of the engineering background and training, and I actually applied it to technical sales for a chemical company. And so my first job was for a large multinational chemical company, but I was in field sales and ultimately worked in sales management, some marketing. Was tapped on the shoulder to help start an environmental consulting division within the company. So that kind of got me out of sales and into more consulting. That led to then management and strategic consulting, and ultimately got hired away from a consulting gig to my first nonprofit job.
Okay, so
that's how I ended up in nonprofit.
On the nonprofit path. Oh, I see. All right. Well, it's interesting. I don't tell anybody, but I actually did the same thing. Partway through my electrical engineering, I decided I didn't want to do pure electrical engineering. And my first job was in field sales for a computer company.
All right.
So interesting. All right.
Yeah.
So your latest position though was Jeeps. Is that, do you say it Jeeps?
Jeeps. Yeah.
You say it as Jeeps, like the Jeeps you drive around, but
exactly.
It stands for the Grain Elevator and Processing Society.
Correct.
So you drove tremendous growth, right? That's one of the things that's obvious, right? In just a few years, tremendous growth. So how were you able to do that? What was that process? What'd you learn in that happening?
I think it's interesting because I think I just came in with a very different vision of what success in an organization looked like compared to, I think, the leaders had. I had the fortunate or unfortunate ability to replace a gentleman that had been in his role for 40 years.
Wow.
And so anyone that you've known that's been in the same role for 40 years, things kind of just are done all the same way all the time. And so the organization was a bit stale. I believe they had focused on many of the wrong things. And to give you an example, they were consistently making their budget and actually putting money in the bank, all while losing members every single year for 10 years. And when you're an association, and membership matters, the idea of continuing to sort of bank money and focus in on your assets versus your mission and your members, it's borderline criminal in the nonprofit world. And so I think when I came in, I just said, hey, we're going to refocus in on membership. We're going to refocus in on member value. Of course, I got hired right before COVID, so that was a little bit of an interesting curveball. But coming out of COVID, we were able to really sort of change up a number of the ways that we thought about membership and tried to become an easier organization to do business with. And in the last 2 years, we've nearly doubled our membership. So it really resonated with the membership and with the industry to say Jeeps is a place, the value that has been around for 100 years is still there. It's just easier to access, and we became an easier organization to do business with.
What's amazing about that is someone might have thought, well, gee, this society's been around forever. Everybody who wants to join has probably joined. There probably aren't that many new members out there to get. But by changing kind of the approach, you were able to go after a lot of new members that were out there and were willing to join. They just hadn't been attractive. It hadn't been the right, connect for them.
And it's interesting. I think the INCOSE CAB program, where you're targeting companies that can benefit through their employees, that was something that Jeeps didn't do. It was purely an individual organization, and we changed that. So we brought in something that looked more like the CAB program and said, we need to not only serve the people that have been around and sort of elevated into a middle management position, but we need to serve the people from day one to the CEOs of the companies that we serve. And so we tried to build a bigger tent. And in building a bigger tent, that includes the roles within the companies and the industries that we serve, but also the geographies. We were international, but we weren't really global. And so we went on a really key growth pattern to say, how do we truly become, global as well?
So I hear a certain element of what must have taken, I'm guessing, but have taken some courage, right? So while you may have been even told we're bringing you in to drive new growth and drive new ideas, that's not automatic, right? You still have to have some courage to go against or push forward in the realm, in the environment of things that have been that way for a long time, and some inertia and that sort of thing. Is that close?
So everyone likes progress, but nobody really likes change, right? And so I ran headfirst into that brick wall. I still have probably some bruises and scars to show for it, because there were a lot of people within the membership and the organization, and some of the leaders that really liked everything the way it was. And so I'm not naive to believe that INCOSE isn't the same way, right? There's relationships, and there's protocols, and there's sacred cows, and I think the good thing about being new to an organization and coming in with a fresh set of eyes is I can ask a lot of dumb questions, and I have opinions, and I'm biased in my own ways about how things can be done, but kind of always asking why, and then asking why again, and I think it's very similar to the engineering mindset. You kind of get to the root cause, and if ultimately in the world of association management, if the root cause is, well, that's just the way we've always done it, that's just not a good answer. Yeah. And all too often in many associations, that's what you will find the rationale to be.
Yeah, I'm with you. So, all right, let's go back to kind of some other elements of your background. So Jeeps, and then I noticed there's this thing called the Jeeps Media Group. So what's that? Was that some sort of a spinoff or something that you created or something?
Well, so, when we, Jeeps is a little different than INCOSE in the fact that a key or a majority of our revenue was actually made through a huge expo and conference that we did. So we would have a 4,000 person expo and education conference that probably drove anywhere from 60 to 70% of our annual revenues. Wow. And so that was great. The conference is great. We were reliant on that as a revenue source to pay for other things. When COVID came and we weren't able to have that conference for almost 2 years, it really highlighted to me and our board that we needed to diversify our revenues. And so we really set out to look at how could we really diversify our revenues without trying to replicate the things that we are really good at, which are membership and is a conference. We had relationships with a publishing company that published a number of magazines and digital products within our space. Through some random conversations and some probably fortuitous timing, we were able to talk to the owner of that company, and he was looking to exit in a few years. Gotcha. So we ended up I should say, establishing a for-profit subsidiary. And then purchasing this company and incorporating it into Jeeps Media Group, which ultimately nearly doubled our revenues almost overnight. Now it's operating as a for-profit business under the umbrella of a nonprofit organization. So it's been an interesting ride. It's something that I'm really proud of. I think it's going to help Jeeps in the future. And it's something that 4 years ago would have never been considered. And so I think that just the transition and transformation of the art of the possible within Jeeps really changed over the time have been here.
Well, that's what I love about that is the creativity to think of, oh, look, we could have a subsidiary that's a for-profit to do things that would leverage and increase the nonprofit, and each would work in its own way. Sometimes people assume nonprofits means they're not supposed to make any profit, right? And it's not that way. Nonprofits often would benefit by acting more like businesses, and thinking that way.
And that has really been the thing that drives me in my nonprofit career is that nonprofit is just an IRS stand, it's a business tax
thing. Yeah.
As with any business, if you don't make any margin, you are going to go out of business. And so the key is to understand, where you can, provide value, where members are looking for those types of investments that they can then benefit from. At the end of the day, you hope that your association is creating products and services and meetings and events that all of your members take advantage of, and that leads to membership growth. But at the same time, if we look at the dynamics of any industry, whether it's agriculture or systems engineering, there's a cadre of people that just won't want to join an association. And so how do we serve those people within the industry component of our mission, even if they're never going to be a member, that's a little bit of a slippery slope. The member versus non-member, who gets what, how do you pay for it, what's the pricing? But those are all the questions that I think we probably need to take a step back and look at and ask ourselves every year, if not every 2 years, about, are we still doing the right thing?
Yeah, that's great. You also worked for a while for the Gallup organization, and I work in quality management working group in INCOSE, and we're a big fan of their research. We're always looking at their research about employee engagement and what's going on and how that's driving and so forth. But my question is, what did you learn from working? Gallup, for those who aren't familiar, is I guess they're global, but they're known certainly in the US, right, as research and consumer research and polling and that analytics and that kind of thing, right? So what did you learn from that experience that would be relevant to what you're going to do here at INCOSE?
I think what I learned from Gallup is the ability to take data, collect correct data, and then use that data to make educated decisions. And all too often, people want either completely complete 100% data, which never comes, or they're making decisions based off of really bad or biased data. And if you start with biased data, you're probably going to end up with a biased conclusion. And so what I think Gallup really looks at and looks at is the scientific approach to data collection. And then that allows people to make more educated decisions. We can look at data and we can come across with different conclusions. But if we're looking at the same data, we can at least, argue and advocate about why we think our conclusion is the best result from this data. But that was the real key thing. Too many organizations, and especially in the nonprofit world, believe that they can't afford to get good data, or have never thought about it, or think it's just something for, a big corporation. But it doesn't have to be through a consultant like Gallup. You can get good data even internally, and it's just a matter of being able to analyze it without overanalyzing it. You can have paralysis too, but being able to use the data to make better decisions.
Yeah, fantastic. I also see in your lineup, kind of working through your background a little bit, you managed a consulting company. So does this give you some special insight about managing consultants? Because at INCOSE, we've got a lot of consultants and contractors and stuff. So does this help seeing it from the other side?
No, I think I think that probably boils down into more of my just management style overall. And that was the company that I started with out of college was based in Chicago, but I was actually in field sales in Las Vegas, Nevada. And so I never had an office to go to, or if it was a tiny office that if you were in the office, you weren't working, right? And so I think the idea of, you don't have to be sitting in an office, you don't have to punch a time clock, but if you're out working, doing the things you should doing and are focused on the outcomes, then you're doing a good set of work. And so that's kind of been the thing that I've brought to the organizations that I've had a leadership role in, is I don't care when you do or what you do, or even how you do the work to a large degree, so long as you get to the outcome, the defined outcome of what success is. And so I think that's both freeing for some employees. It's terrifying for others, by the way. There are some employees that just really are saying, hey, I don't feel comfortable in having that level of accountability. And so that's a little bit of a culture. You have to kind of understand where people can be allowed to fail. I think, failing isn't failure. Failing is learning most of the time. And so you want to sort of put guardrails up for people so that if they're driving the car, they hit the guardrail, they don't drive off the cliff. And so that's kind of how I've always approached it. Probably managing consultants is very much in that vein of a consultant's going to be really good if they take your idea, or if they take their idea and they make it sound like your idea, or they're going to take your idea and spit it back to you. But it's I think it's unique in the realm of just focusing in on outcomes, because a good consultant will have a very defined success metric, and they'll continue to get rehired if they can deliver on that. Very
good. So I noticed, some of your work, as you look at your experiences, has been in the area of what we, charity nonprofits, 501c3s, which are, public charities, whatever terminology. In other words, they're for the good of the community and things like that. And then some of your work has been more professional society, Jeeps. And so I'm kind of leading to, why INCOSE, right? So is this split kind of profession slash hobby? In other words, I'm going to work in professional societies, but as a hobby, I'm going to work in these community charities, or how does that work for you?
No, so I think part of it's just my own personal growth and challenge. And so sitting in on a board of a nonprofit has really helped me in my own ability to focus on leadership, understanding from a board director's role, what my role is on a board helps me in my role as an executive director in leading boards. And so that's really been what I've focused in on. My work, I've worked in both a 501c3 and a 501c6. At the end of the day, they're still mission-driven organizations. It's about where the funding sort of comes from. But in my personal growth and my own ability or desire to challenge myself to grow professionally, that's really what I've done. Is like, it's hard for me, or I should say it's easier for me to approach the INCOSE board into the future and say, this is how the board should operate. And not only because it's something that I think as an executive director, but it's also my experience from having sat on other boards.
Well, that's leads us into something I want to ask about too, is, there's could be different philosophies, right? INCOSE has had a history, as I'm sure you've learned, right, of volunteer effort. We've always had, volunteers, both elected volunteers like on the board, and appointed volunteers like assistant and associate directors, and many other volunteers, right? INCOSE, almost all volunteers. So what's the balance, or what can you say about the balance between, these elected positions, these appointed volunteers, and then we have a lot of, contractors and very few employee type staff, but kind of paid staff members that do things. How do you balance all this, and who runs the show, and what's the ideal formula for all this?
Yeah, and so I mean, at the end of the day, it's a membership association. The association will always be member directed, maybe is the best way. So a lot of times people say, well, it's member led or it's member operated, but I like the term member directed, and I use that term specifically because at the end of the day, if you think about what a board of directors should do, it's about oversight, governance, and strategy. And so when a board then hires a staff and hires an executive director manages staff, a lot of those operational decisions probably should filter down to the staff. Now, with INCOSE and my role kind of being the first, it's going to be a time of change, and there's going to be some cultural bumps and potholes along the way. I have no doubt. But I do believe that there are, for all of the value that you bring, for all the value that the other directors bring, and all of the other, we still need all of that expertise from you in the profession and as a member. But in my experience, we've also seen all too often, if a board member that is a systems engineer all of a sudden tries to do the budgeting in a finance matter, I'm using that as an example. If they're not an accountant or not a CPA, sometimes you can get out of your lane of skills and experience. And so that's where, why do it as a volunteer if you can afford to pay someone as a professional to do it? And that's where a lot of staffs come in.
And I know exactly what you're saying, because sometimes we sort of luck out, right? And we're able to elect someone who has an extensive professional background in that field, but that's not always available, right? Especially in some of the areas like, I don't know, marketing. How many systems engineers have a deep background in marketing,
Right.
and IT for that matter, right? I mean, I had some IT background, but the way it is now, some of our roles are kind of mashed all together, right? The board role and the day-to-day management role and all of that is kind of mashed together. So what I hear you saying sort of between the lines is maybe ultimately we need to sort of split those up in some way over time, right? So there's staff roles that do things, there's directors roles who are more directors than operational, kind of things.
And I think in a perfect world, take your role as in the information technology, having you and the board say, this is where we need to be strategically in technology, as opposed to making the decisions on which platform we use or doing coding. Right. There's a very different realm of where a board needs to say, this is our vision for technology. And then who executes it. And again, that's a longer term, we're just at the very first step of this realistically. And INCOSE's got a number of consultants and contractors that do a lot of work. And it'll take a little bit of time to say, who are the right people to be doing this? Where does the decision making lie? And there'll be some growing pains, undoubtedly. I'm sure.
Now, don't go thinking you're going to take away the coding part of my job. That's the most fun of the part of stuff I do, right? Did somebody tell you I
Right,
was
right.
writing a lot of code for to
I,
do
I,
the
I
closing?
heard, I think you told me you're writing a lot of
I'll
code.
tell you
So.
that. Well, that's kind of the fun part. All right. Speaking of fun, right? Let me ask you this. And this is kind of maybe the last big question, but you can elaborate on this as much as you want. What's the part of this job, this new adventure for you, right, that you're most excited about? You know how in any job you're like, well, I know I got to do this and I got to do this, but here's the part that's really going to be fun that I'm really going to like, right? How's that? How you think about that?
So there's a couple of things, and maybe three. And so I think you mentioned Gallup before, and Gallup is really big into strengths and strengths finders. And there's probably a lot of INCOSE members that have taken the Gallup strengths finders, it was grilled into me about what mine are. And my top five strengths were competition, achiever, maximizer, woo, and futuristic. And for those that may be familiar with Gallup strengths, every day is a game to me. Every day I have to win something, and so coming at it from that direction, I love the business of business, and I love the business of nonprofits. And so every nonprofit has a challenge of the day, just like every business has a challenge of the day. And you want to be proactive to be able to prevent some of those problems, but you want to be able to also win the day when they arrive. So it's a challenge, and it's a new challenge, and that sort of excites me. Being new to the role, being new to a new role is kind of even more exciting to think about the art of the possible. But within all of that, I think the things that drive me personally, I really like people. And I know saying this to a group of systems engineers that like process and like documentation, at the end of the day, it's a people organization, and the nonprofit itself is even more so than something else. We exist because of our members and because of the people. And so we have to be able to relate. And that includes me talking to you on a video like this. It includes showing that, I think one of my first meetings will be the Indiana chapter meeting here in a couple of weeks. I'll be in Spain for the EMEA meeting in here in April as well, and getting to know the members, getting to know people, getting to meet and understand different perspectives. That really helps, I think, not just the organization understand what we can do to deliver value, but it's something that it sort of drives me personally as well.
Great. So, all right, terrific. So what else should I have asked you? What did I not ask you that I should have asked you?
I think what's the biggest fear? I don't know.
Okay, all right, we go with that.
No, I don't. I don't think there's a big fear. I think one of the things that I have been probably accused of, perhaps rightly so, is that I like to move very fast, and so that's one thing that I think is
so this is what we should be afraid of. Right?
This perhaps maybe that's and so I do think the coming in with sets of experience. There will be problems, I think, that I might see that no one else has seen. I'll be like, yeah, I've seen this before. This is how we can fix it. But if no one else sees it, then you have to take a step back and say, well, this is why this problem exists. And so I know that that's something that I think that we have to be all cognizant of is coming in, new association, fresh eyes. I'm going to ask a lot of questions that people are going to say, well, of course we do it this way. and then I'm probably going to make a recommendation of, no, we absolutely should do this that way. And I'll have to, make sure that I'm fully explaining myself too.
Well, we really appreciate the positive attitude, the enthusiasm. Of course, you haven't started yet, so there's always,
it's
right. So
I feel like I've already been on the job with the number of calls, though. I really asked for this. I said I wanted to get to know people, start having conversations. That way, day one isn't really day one. It's a little bit more educated than day one.
And hit the ground, run, and jump into the game and win something that first
win
day.
Something
like
today on day one. Exactly.
Right. Exactly. All right. Well, so in wrapping up, anything else you'd like to say or share with our members here in your introductory little interview? I'm really looking forward to getting to meet and know as many of the INCOSE members as possible. And regardless, just thank you for your membership. Thank you for being part of the organization. I look forward to being part of the organization and getting to know the value, helping it grow, because
it's such an important part of not only the industry that everyone plays in, but the individual lives of the members and how it can impact them, help them grow, help them achieve more in their own career. So I'm looking forward to being a small part of it.
Excellent. Well, we'll leave it right there. So Steve Records, new INCOSE Executive Director starting April 3rd, I think it is. So just a few days away. And we will look forward to a great adventure with Steve joining. So I'm Barclay Brown. I'm CIO of INCOSE, your host for the INCOSE Circuit today, and we'll see you next time.